The day they read the will, it was raining in Hartfield, Ohio. Not a dramatic storm, just the kind of cold, stubborn rain that settles over the Midwest in November and refuses to leave. The kind that blurs the windows and fills the silence with something that doesn't care about what's happening inside. Inside the offices of Patton and Associates on the 14th floor of the Meridian building, the conference room smelled like polished wood, cold coffee, and the particular tension of a family pretending to grieve while mentally doing math. His name was Cole Hargrove, 36 years old. He did structural inspection work for a living: bridges, overpasses, highway underpasses, the kinds of concrete and steel joints that held entire counties together and that nobody ever thought about until they didn't. He drove a 2006 Suburban with a cracked windshield and rust creeping up the rear wheel wells. He wore the same pair of heavy work boots every season, resoled twice. His apartment sat above a hardware store on Dunmore Street, and on most days that life felt honest in a way that nothing about the Hargrove family name ever had. Cole was the quiet son, the one who left the company 9 years ago, the one nobody photographed at Christmas, the one who, according to everyone at this table, had been the disappointment that their father never admitted out loud. He took a seat near the door. Nobody acknowledged him. Across the table, his stepmother Vivian sat in a fitted block coat that probably cost more than Cole's monthly rent. Her diamond earrings caught what little light existed in the room, and her hands rested beside a leather handbag with practiced stillness. Down from her, Cole's half-brother Derek scrolled through his phone. Silver Rolex, sharp navy suit, fresh haircut, the kind of man who checked stock prices during funerals. And beside Derek, Cole's half-sister Adrian had a legal pad open in front of her, already scribbling notes, already billing the moment in her head. She was a corporate attorney, and she carried herself like someone who corrected people for using the wrong fork. Cole looked down at his own clothes. Work jacket, faded jeans, a smear of bridge coating compound near his left cuff from a joint inspection he'd finished that morning on the Route 9 overpass. He hadn't changed. Dead men didn't wait for clean clothes. The attorney at the head of the table was a man named Gerald Patton. He'd represented Cole's father, Warren Hargrove, for 31 years. He looked thinner than Cole remembered, older around the eyes, but his voice when he finally spoke still carried the weight of a man who understood that what he was about to do mattered. "Thank you all for being here," he said. Nobody answered. Rain topped the windows. Gerald opened the folder in front of him. Warren J. Hargrove, estate documents, embossed in gold at the top. Derek looked up from his phone. "Let's get this moving. I've got a board call at 4. Gerald ignored him. He read the will with the precision of a man who had written it carefully and intended to deliver it the same way. Vivian received the lake house in Millport. Adrian received the investment accounts. Derek inherited controlling operational shares in Hargrove Industrial pending board confirmation. Nobody looked surprised. Cole sat quietly. Before we go deeper into this story, take 1 second right now. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories reach. We are American Truth Tales, and stories like this one are the reason we exist. Then Gerald turns to the final page. "To my son, Cole Hargrove." Derek's smirk arrived before the sentence even finished. Gerald reached into a small velvet case beside the folder and set something on the table. A ring. Thin silver band, plain, the kind you'd find in any pawn shop display case between broken watch straps and somebody's forgotten anniversary. No stone, no engraving visible from where Cole sat. Just a simple ring that looked like it belonged to a working man, not a wealthy one. Adrian blinked once. "That's it?" Derek laughed softly through his nose. "That actually tracks." Vivian spoke carefully, as though she'd rehearsed the line. Warren always believed sentimental things mattered to Cole. Gerald slid the ring across the table without comment. Cole picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, cool metal against his palm. He turned it once, twice, looking at the inside of the band. Nothing visible. Derek leaned forward. "Father finally gave you something you can't break." Adrian smiled at the table. Cole said nothing. That bothered Derek more than any response would have. The room settled. Rain, the hum of the air vent, Gerald closing the folder slowly. Then he looked up, not at the family, at Cole specifically, and something changed in his expression. The professional distance pulled back for just a half second, like a curtain shifted by a draft. "Everyone else needs to leave the room," he said. Nobody moved. Derek frowned. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Adrian straightened. "If this concerns estate matters, we're all legally entitled." "It concerns specific instructions from Warren Hargrove for Cole alone." Vivian's face didn't change, but Cole noticed the smallest tightening along her jaw, the flicker of someone calculating risk behind a composed expression. Derek leaned back. "Come on, this is theater." Gerald didn't blink. "Your father anticipated resistance to this request." He opened a side drawer and removed a sealed envelope, dark red wax, Warren Hargrove's initials pressed in the center. He placed it on the table. He was very clear. If anyone refused to leave, I was to contact probate court immediately and suspend the reading process. Derek stared at him. "You're serious?" "Yes." Vivian rose first, smoothly, quietly. Her chair scraped back with a soft, controlled sound, and she picked up her handbag without rushing. But before she walked to the door, she looked at Cole, directly for the first time all afternoon. Not sadness, not warmth, something closer to measurement, like she was calculating how much trouble Cole was capable of becoming. Then she left. Adrian followed, visibly irritated. Derek stayed seated longest. His eyes dropped to the ring in Cole's hand. Something cold moved across his face, there and gone before it could be named. Then he stood. "You know, Dad spent years regretting the time he wasted on you." Cole looked at him without expression. Derek smiled wider. "Congratulations on the jewelry." He walked out, the door shut behind him. The room became something else entirely, quieter, heavier, the way a space changes when the performance in it ends and only the truth is left. Gerald waited until the sound of footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Then he walked to the conference room door. He locked it. The metal catch clicked softly. He came back to the table, loosened his tie, and sat down. For the first time all afternoon, he looked something other than professional. He looked like a man who had been carrying something for years and was finally allowed to set it down. He nodded towards the ring. "Look at the inside of the band." Cole held it up to the light. There, thin, deliberate engraving along the interior curve. Numbers, an address, and those 6 words again in Hargrove's sharp block printing. Trust documents, not blood, not noise. Gerald produced a small precision screwdriver from his jacket pocket. "Your father brought me that ring 8 years ago. He told me if anything happened to him before certain things surfaced, I was to give it to you only after the others left the room." Cole felt his pulse slow, which was what always happened to Cole when something mattered too much to rush. Gerald inserted the screwdriver into an almost invisible seam along the inner edge of the band. A soft click, a hairline gap opened along the inner edge of the ring's inner layer. Gerald carefully worked the inner layer free. Pressed flat against the interior surface of the band, so thin it was nearly translucent, was a strip of paper no wider than a matchstick. Cole unfolded it carefully. 3 things: a 10-digit number, a storage facility address in Caldwell, Ohio, and those same 6 words again in Hargrove's sharp block printing. Trust documents, not blood, not noise. Gerald folded his hands. "The number is for a safe deposit box, First Consolidated Bank, Caldwell Branch." He paused. "And there's something else." He opened his briefcase and produced a separate folder. Bank statements, transfer records, corporate documents, handwritten notes from Warren, yellow sticky tabs on some pages, red ink circles on others, and one name repeating across every highlighted line: Blackwater Ridge Holdings, LLC. Transfer amounts: $38,000, $67,000, $112,000, always internally approved, always electronically signed. "Shell company," Cole said. "Yes," Registered 3 years ago. He hesitated. We couldn't determine by whom, officially. Officially, Cole noticed the word. Gerald continued. Your father believed money had been disappearing from Hargrove Industrial for years before his illness. At first, he thought it was accounting sloppiness. Then, he knew it wasn't. And he didn't go to the police because he didn't know who he could trust. A pause, including inside the family. Cole looked at the documents quietly. Warren Hargrove built the company from a 2-bay repair garage in Dayton in the late 80s. By the time Cole was born, they were manufacturing industrial cooling systems across 4 states. Warren trusted machines more than people. Machines failed for reasons. People failed for opportunities. When did he know for sure? Cole asked. 3 weeks before he died. That landed differently than Cole expected, because it meant his father spent his final days watching someone close to him bleed the company he built, unable to fully stop it. Gerald slid a small brass key across the table. Safe deposit key. Your father's instructions were clear. Give it to you only after the reading, after they left the room. Cole picked it up. Old scratches along the teeth, used often. What's in the box? Gerald glanced toward the locked door before answering. Evidence. The kind he believed might disappear if the wrong people reached it first. Cole looked at him steadily. You're saying I should go tonight. Gerald stood and walked to the window overlooking the rain-soaked street below. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. Quieter, more careful. Your brother requested copies of estate transfer records last week, and Vivienne contacted probate court before your father was even buried. The silence after that said everything. If they suspect Warren hid something, Gerald said, they'll start looking. Cole slipped the folded strip of paper into his wallet, then gathered the documents into a careful stack. What happens if I find what he left? Gerald looked directly at him. Then you'll understand why your father trusted the quiet son instead of the ambitious ones. Cole stood. He slid the ring onto his finger for the first time. It fit as though it had been made for him, which he suspected was not an accident. Gerald unlocked the door. Down the hall, faintly, Adrian's voice carried, Derek laughing about something. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds. But Cole noticed something in that moment he hadn't earlier. Nobody in that family had cried today, not once. 3 hours later, rain hammered the interstate as Cole's Suburban pushed south through darkness towards Coldwell. The wipers dragged across the cracked windshield on each stroke. The highway was mostly empty, just headlights and brake lights and the long flat of Ohio at night. The ring was on his finger. He hadn't taken it off. The storage facility address from the ring's interior matched a safe deposit branch at First Consolidated Bank's Caldwell location. He arrived just before 10. A night manager verified his ID without conversation, led him through a vault door that opened with a deep mechanical thud and stopped beside box 311. Cole inserted the brass key. Inside, a black USB drive, a thick folder, a sealed envelope with his name on it in his father's handwriting. And beneath everything, one more thing Cole hadn't expected. A photograph, old and creased, of Cole at maybe 14, standing beside Warren at a drafting table in his workshop, both of them bent over some structural drawings, 2 pencils pointing at the same line. Neither smiling, both completely focused. On the back, his father had written, "This is who you were before the noise got loud." Cole drove to a motel just outside Caldwell and spread everything across the small table near the window. He opened the envelope first. Cole, if you're holding this, then I was right to worry. I wanted to believe I was becoming paranoid. Old men see threats where there are none, but numbers don't lie, and machines don't hide their intentions. People do. The company called Blackwater Ridge Holdings has been receiving money from Hargrove Industrial for 4 years through layered vendor payments and false maintenance contracts. I traced several of the transfers myself. I believe Derek controls it through intermediaries. I do not know how involved Vivienne is. I want to believe she's only protecting him, but I no longer trust the legal documents that appeared before me during my hospitalization. If my signature appears on transfer authorizations dated October 9th, challenge them. That was the week I lost full consciousness after my second stroke. 9 years ago, the warehouse brake failure was not your fault. Cole set the letter down. The motel room felt suddenly very small. He read the sentence again. The warehouse brake failure was not your fault. 9 years. 9 years carrying that. The OSHA investigation, the worker with the shattered hip. Derek publicly blaming Cole in front of the entire company within 48 hours before any investigation concluded. Warren's silence, which Cole had spent nearly a decade interpreting as agreement. He kept reading. The hydraulic system was tampered with before the incident. I discovered this too late to undo the damage to your name publicly. Derek insisted the company needed quick accountability. I let him control the story. That was my greatest failure as your father. The final paragraph was handwritten, slightly shakier than the rest. You were never weak, Cole. You simply never learned to perform strength for people who were selling it. Trust documents, not noise. Cole sat without moving for a long time after that. Then he opened the folder. Bank records organized by date, transfers highlighted in yellow marker. The same pattern repeated across 4 years, money leaving Hargrove Industrial through vendor payments to companies that didn't appear to do any real work. Cooling system maintenance, equipment calibration, transport logistics, small enough to evade immediate scrutiny inside a large operation. Together, millions. He found the Blackwater Ridge registration documents near the back of the folder. Registered agent A.L. Hargrove Legal Consulting. He stared at the address beneath it, Hartfield's financial district, the same building where Adrian's firm occupied the 11th floor. Not just Derek, Adrian too, or at least her office. Cole plugged the USB into his laptop. 4 folders, financial records, corporate transfers, 1 folder marked simply Cole, 1 marked Oct. He opened Cole first. Old performance evaluations, factory photos, maintenance records from the Toledo plant, and at the bottom, a video file dated 9 years earlier. Security footage from Plant 2, black and white, silent, timestamp running across the bottom. The warehouse platform, the hydraulic brake assembly, workers moving crates. Then a figure entered frame in a company jacket. Cole leaned forward. It wasn't Cole. It was Derek. He crouched beside the brake housing for approximately 35 seconds, glancing toward the hallway entrance first, then back to the assembly, before leaving frame. 2 hours later, according to the timestamp, the system failed. Cole watched the clip 4 times. His pulse had slowed the way it always did when something mattered too much to react to quickly. He opened the Oct folder. Audio file. Hospital background sounds, a monitor beeping steadily. Then voices, muffled but clear enough. Derek, quietly. He's barely responsive. The authorization needs his signature tonight. A woman's voice, Vivienne. The forms are here. Martin said the window closes at midnight. Then another voice, barely audible, weak, confused.
What is this? Derek, smooth and immediate. Insurance form stat, standard transfer. We talked about this. A long silence, the sound of paper, a pen. Cole closed the laptop. The motel room felt colder than the thermostat could explain. His father had known. Lying in a hospital bed, barely conscious, he had known. And instead of breaking apart, he had built traps. The watch, the ring, had held the first key. The storage box held the evidence, and somewhere inside all of it was a man who loved his quiet son enough to trust him with the truth instead of the money.
Then Cole's phone vibrated on the table. Unknown number. He answered. Silence. Then a voice, low, artificially calm. You should stop looking into your father's business, Cole. People who pull at these threads tend to find more than they can handle. Click. Cole set the phone down slowly. Outside headlights swept across the motel window and disappeared back into the rain. He looked at the ring on his finger. Then he opened a new note on his phone and typed 2 words at the top. Always copies. And right here, before I tell you how this resolves, I want to ask you directly. Cole is holding evidence that could undo his entire family. He's been dismissed his whole life. He's been blamed for something that wasn't his fault. What would you do with what he now knows? Would you use it? Would you walk away? Tell me in the comments, because I think the answer to that question says something real about who we are, and I want to hear it from you. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday. Derek had moved to push through an acquisition vote, a sale of Hargrove Industrial's operational divisions to a private equity group called Crestwood North Partners. If it passed before probate litigation could freeze the structure, the evidence inside those corporate accounts could disappear forever inside a restructuring deal. Cole drove back to Hartfield with the USB drive and the folder locked in the Suburban center console. He called Gerald from the road. Gerald had already received something from probate court, an emergency filing from Vivian's attorneys requesting temporary restriction of estate materials. Fast, too fast. They knew something had been left behind. Cole met with an independent forensic accountant named Paul Greer, a former state financial crimes investigator in Gerald's home study that evening. Paul spread the documents across a wide oak desk and spent 2 hours tracing the transfer chains while a fire burned low in the fireplace. The number was $14.3 million, extracted over 4 years through layered vendor fraud with final routing through offshore holding accounts connected to Crestwood North Partners itself. The acquisition wasn't a rescue, it was the endgame of the extraction. They weren't saving the company, Paul said quietly. They were positioning to buy it cheap after hollowing it out. Gerald looked at Cole. You need to be at that board meeting Monday morning. Derek will try to block me. He'll try, Gerald said, but your father built a contingency. He opened another envelope, a sealed trust addendum, marked open only upon evidence of executive misconduct. Inside, a signed authorization from Warren Hargrove 7 years earlier. If financial misconduct by executive leadership is substantiated, all operational control transfers temporarily to Cole Hargrove, acting trustee, pending court review. Cole read it twice. Gerald's phone rang at 11:30. One of the board members, calling privately. Derek had moved the vote up, 7 a.m. Monday, 2 hours earlier than scheduled. They were running out of time. Hargrove Industrial's headquarters stood at the edge of the Hartfield Industrial Corridor, and on Monday morning, its executive boardroom carried the specific tension of people who prepared for a fight they weren't certain they'd win. Cole arrived in his work jacket, no suit, no tie. Paul Greer carried 2 hard cases behind him. Gerald walked beside Cole with a document binder marked Trust Activation Materials. Derek stood near the projection screen showing Crestwood acquisition slides. Adrienne sat with the legal team. Vivian was positioned near the windows. None of them looked surprised Cole had come. That told him everything. They'd known he would come. They'd just hoped to finish before he arrived. This is a restricted board meeting, Derek said. Martin placed documentation on the table. Not under the Warren Hargrove Trust contingency provision. Several board members exchanged glances. Paul connected his laptop to the projector. The acquisition slides disappeared. In their place, financial tracing charts, transfer maps, digital metadata records. Cole spoke quietly into the silence. Before any vote happens today, The board deserves to know why company assets have been routed through fraudulent vendor structures connected to the very group proposing to acquire what's left. The room went still. Not dramatically, the way rooms go still when accountants get nervous, which is more dangerous than any shouting. Paul advanced through the evidence methodically. Blackwater Ridge Holdings, the transfer chains, the October 9th authorization, signed according to hospital records during the precise window when Warren Hargrove was clinically incapacitated. He opened the Plant 2 security footage. Derek, 9 years younger, crouching beside the brake housing, checking the hallway, leaving, 2 hours before the platform failed. A board member whispered something under his breath. Derek's composure fractured. That footage is incomplete. It proves nothing. It proves deception, which is what audits are for. Adrienne closed her eyes briefly. Vivian remained at the window, completely still. Then, unexpectedly, Adrienne spoke. Derek, her voice was flat, I told you 2 months ago that the hospital records would surface. The room shifted. Derek stared at her. I told you, she said again, quieter. I thought the vendor transfers were temporary. I didn't know the scope until after Dodd's second stroke, and I should have stopped it then. Derek's composure finished breaking. You're doing this here? In front of… You should have stopped. She looked at the table, not at Cole. That's all I have to say. Gerald placed the trust addendum in front of the board. Under the contingency provisions established by Warren Hargrove, I'm formally requesting emergency suspension of executive authority pending probate review and forensic audit. The oldest member of the board, a man who had known Warren for 20 years, looked at the documents, looked at Derek, looked at Cole in his work jacket. All executive transfer actions are suspended effective immediately, he said. Pending investigation, operational authority transfers under trust supervision. A pause. Mr. Cole Hargrove, that means you. Derek's chair scraped back hard. This is absurd. Cole looked at him calmly. You were right about one thing, he said. I'm not a corporate strategist. Derek waited, certain an insult was coming. I fix systems, Cole said. And every structure I've ever inspected that failed started with someone ignoring small cracks until the whole thing came down. Nobody spoke after that. The evidence sat on the table. The board sat with it. And the quiet son, who drove a rusted 2006 Suburban and spent his days on scaffolding over river crossings and had spent 9 years carrying blame that belonged to someone else, had done exactly what his father left him the ring to do. Not revenge, structure. 6 weeks later, Cole was standing on the catwalk above the Plant 2 floor in Toledo when the third shift came back at full capacity for the first time in 4 years. Machines running, weld sparks below, the smell of machine oil and hot steel. He looked down at the ring on his finger. Simple band, cool metal, no stone. Derek had resigned from all executive roles within days of the board meeting. Federal investigators froze 3 Blackwater Ridge-connected accounts by the end of the week. Adrienne was cooperating. Vivian had retained separate counsel and wasn't returning calls. Cole hadn't moved into the executive office. He walked the floors instead, restored maintenance schedules, reopened the safety inspections that had been quietly canceled, brought back the senior engineers Derek had pushed out to cut overhead costs. Every decision looked small alone. Together, they stabilized the company within 30 days. One afternoon, he drove the Suburban back to his father's old workshop in Dayton, a 2-bay garage on the edge of an industrial street where Warren Hargrove had started all of this before Cole was born. The smell hit him at the door. Machine oil, old paper, cold steel. On the workbench, he found one more thing his father had left behind, a small metal card holder tucked beneath an oil-stained manual. Inside, dozens of handwritten names. not executives, not lawyers, factory workers, floor managers, maintenance staff, the people Warren trusted. He smiled faintly. Even at the end, his father had thought like a builder. He fastened the ring back onto his finger and locked the workshop door behind him. Warren Hargrove hadn't left his quiet son wealth. He'd left him responsibility, evidence, patience, and the choice to become something different from the men who had tried to take everything. The ring had looked like nothing, a thin silver band, something to laugh at in a conference room full of people who measured worth in square footage and stock price. But inside, it held a number, an address, and a message from a father who had finally found a way to say what he couldn't say out loud. I trusted you. I always trusted you. You just had to wait long enough for it to matter. If this story found something in you today, if it made you think about the quiet people in your life, or about what it costs to be patient in a world that rewards noise, then it did exactly what stories like this one are supposed to do. We are American truth tales. We tell these stories because the world is full of Cole Hargroves, people dismissed, blamed, sidelined, who turn out to be the only ones still standing when the truth finally surfaces. The quiet ones, the ones doing honest work while everyone else is performing ambition. These people deserve to be seen. Hit the like button if this story moved you. It takes 1 second and it means everything to us. Subscribe to American Truth Tales so you never miss what comes next. We're here every single week with stories the headlines skip, the ones about ordinary people and the extraordinary things that quietly happen to them. Leave a comment. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. The ring, the footage, the letter, the boardroom. Tell me if you've ever been the person everyone dismissed and what happened when they finally saw what they missed. I read every comment, every one. And if someone in your life needs to hear a story like this right now, someone who's been told they're not enough for too long, share this video with them today. Because sometimes the most important thing one person can do for another is simply show them quiet doesn't mean wrong. Patient doesn't mean weak, and the ones who wait for the truth usually understand it better than the ones who tried to bury it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next one.